Our husbands may not be the richest man in the world, but they are very ambitious and hardworking and trying to do something with their life. And there's going to be a lot more chance that they'll succeed if they have you, the good woman, behind them.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about all things that have to do with femininity and building strong, long-lasting, loving relationships. I am Cherry Lynn, and I am here with my mom, Dixie Andelin Forsyth. Hi.
Hi.
And mom has a cold, so...
Yeah, sorry everybody. Fortunately, I can't give you my cold on the internet. So
yeah, bear with us here. But we are excited to talk about a subject. We had a request for this just recently, several in a row on Instagram. It's kind of a coincidence, it seemed, that several ladies that don't know each other kind of asked us similar questions. The question is about what to do when he has other priorities outside of you that feel more important than your relationship. And I know that sounds a little bit vague, but meaning maybe work is really his priority right now. He's working crazy hours, or maybe school is a big priority for him right now, and he is just really focused. Some of these women are saying that they feel neglected, or they feel like maybe their kids are neglected, or even the ladies that are dating just kind of feel like, oh, is he pulling away from me? Is he not interested in me? But they all have the same thing in common, that these men are not, they're actually not, from what we can hear, we don't have the whole story, but from what we can tell, they're just focused on other things, which isn't always a bad thing. So we're going to talk about that today.
You know, when the subject was brought up, it reminded me when Bob and I were first married, dating, and then we were first married. He was very focused on going to school, graduate school. Some of you may not have realized that when we got married, he was only in his second year of college. And he ended up getting a doctorate degree. So it meant he had to finish all of his undergraduate and all of the graduate while we were having our kids, because we had our first child less than a year after we were married. So I related to that very well, because that happened to me. There was one semester where Bob took like 25 hours, if you can imagine. This is graduate school. It's a lot. And, you know, he ended up getting straight A's, which is, just blew me away. I remember thinking, won't it be great one day when he comes home and he doesn't have to do homework at night? Because
it's crazy that you went through that. I think so many people know you for who you are now, and that's who they know, and they follow you and everything, but they don't really all realize how far you guys have come.
Let's keep in mind, too, just to stay focused on this, that we are not talking about men who are deliberately ignoring you or just don't care. Men that are just trying to avoid you. We're talking about men who are basically good men who seem very focused on something else, for like school or like work, careers, for stretches of time.
Right. This isn't about men that are, working late. And
No. We're not talking about cheating.
That's not what we're talking about.
No, we're not.
Yeah.
My first 3 kids, Bob was in graduate school, and there's no way he could get up in the night and help me, ever. Ever. And sometimes I was sick. I remember once I had a kidney infection and he had to go to school. Anyway, this is more what we're talking about. Or a man who's really focused on his career and has opportunities. Or a man who, during all these crises we've been having, has lost his job and is trying to get another job or career.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there are just so many different circumstances that life can throw at you, all the seasons of life. Men are all different, of course, and they're all going to react differently to it. But there is something that we hear, it's very common, that when he basically feels like he's up to the plate, and I know this sounds so vague, but when a man feels like he is stepping up to the plate and he is going for it, and that could be so many different things, it's important for us to recognize that rather than feel like it's all about us and it's, I feel this way, or the kids, and we can get into all that, but it's kind of hard to talk about this because it's super vague. And the only thing I can think to do is like what you're doing, is to relate to it myself, and because I've been through it too. So we can kind of share some of our personal stories to hopefully help fill in the gaps because we don't have a real detailed story to share. And then we're going to go through 5 things we kind of narrowed it down to 5 things that we feel are really important to understand about him. This video is kind of about understanding men. It's just another side subject.
We can talk about understanding men all day long, every day.
Life is very complex. There are no guarantees.
And go over the same things in different ways and still not cover it all because they're so different than we are. One of the first things I would say to remind ourselves is that men are, the way their brains are wired, more front to back, which means they're more target or task oriented. They do the best when they focus on something to try to get it. They're not as good at multitasking, which we are because our brains are wired more side to side. So we can balance out more all these different relationships easier than them, especially when they've got a lot on their plate. They tend to focus on one thing at a time.
It doesn't mean that women aren't task oriented.
No.
It just means that when he is in it, it's a little bit harder to interrupt him or to take him away from it because that's just how his brain works.
See, women can be task-oriented and relationship-oriented at the same time. Right. It's much more difficult for men. So if he's focused on getting a job done, as in his career, studying for a career, trying to get ahead, he's not going to be as good at saying, how can I help you with the kids? And it can be frustrating for us. So.
And it can feel lonely too.
Yes, it can.
I think that's a big thing with women is that we get lonely. And not all of the stories that we hear are the same, but I know that's happened to me a few times. I've misunderstood that task mode time. Can you explain, how do you identify if he's on task mode versus, sometimes men kind of retreat and they go into their cave. Like, that's different than what we're talking about. Can you explain how to identify if he's on task mode?
He's not listening to you, for one thing. That's pretty easy, isn't it? I know for me, if Bob is on task mode, he seems grumpier. He's not a grumpy person, but if I interrupt him, he's like, what do you want? Kind of a thing where he's not normally like that. That's a major clue for me. Yeah. I've interrupted him, more if he's in his cave. I'll say, Bob, and he'll be, I'll do this for an example. He's reading, and he'll just go, Well, I think he didn't hear me. He didn't hear me.
Yeah.
And if I say something, he's just silence.
But that's an example of a task mode that might be short. Like, that might be gone in an hour. So that's
or 5 minutes. Or 5 minutes. He may be reading an email or something about his work. And I've just interrupted him. And sometimes later he'll say, what was that you said? And I've gone off to something else. But when he is in task mode, which he's not in school anymore, obviously, but he still gets in that mode, I've just learned to just let that time pass. Now, I don't have new babies. So the empathy here is what do we do when we have you have children or other issues, you feel like you need him? What do? I think it's important to kind of go through this and understand it first. If we can understand this about them, we will be such better wives, such better women, better mothers. We could go on and on. I think just understanding this is tough for a lot of women. And it was so tough for me. I know this happened to me when my husband and I were dating and we were in school. And he actually broke up with me when he was on task mode. I know that's more of an extreme. He did? Oh, gee, that's rough.
Well, he realized the next day that he'd made a huge mistake, and that's a whole other story. But I think, when we're talking about, well, how do I identify when he's on task mode? I had no idea about any of this stuff. I had no idea. I was very inexperienced when we were dating. We were like 20 years old, and he broke up with me because he said, I really need to focus on school right now. He was the president of his fraternity. He was taking so many hours. He had 3 jobs, and he said, I don't have time for you. And I was devastated.
Yeah, I would be. Yeah, I would be.
And I hope I'm sharing this, I hope he's okay that I'm sharing this, but I'm sharing this for the ladies out there, hopefully that maybe are going through something similar. Hopefully he didn't break up with you, because that was an extreme version, because my husband is very, very task focused. He's a very tasky man, and he's a very, very hard worker, and he gets very passionate about work. And I didn't know that about him back then. We were in school, and I went to my girlfriends and said, well, he said that he's too busy with school. And they all told me that he was basically like kind of a bum for doing that. The lesson that I learned from all of that was it was kind of an introduction to his style of how he handles stress. And I think that to me would be another sign of, if he's on task mode, does he appear to be really stressed? And how does he handle stress? Does he handle stress by getting things done?
Well, and you can always be really grateful if your man is like that he is ambitious.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I know I've heard women say they just wish they could motivate their man to do something more with his life.
Yes.
And then there's the men like your husband that had 3 jobs and was going to school. If he is very ambitious and you feel like he's taking too much time, this is partly for how to deal with that.
I love that you use that word ambitious, because when I told my friends what had happened when we were in college, they called him a bum, and they said he was kind of like a rat, and they kind of insinuated that he was mistreating me. And I believed all those things because I didn't understand. And then when we repaired all of this, of course, I realized that ambition that you're describing. And and that's one of the things that I love about him, is that how ambitious he is. And I've always been attracted to that side of him. So to remember that and to remind myself of that constantly is something I have to do. Right now, he works 12, I mean, you know this, he works 12, 14-hour days now.
He does, yeah, he does.
He can't help me with the kids. He can step in if there's an emergency, but I don't expect him to, because I know what his goals are. And I know that he is working towards those goals so hard. You can't force him to do these things, and you're not his mother.
Well, that's its own issue, is spending time with the kids, because we have in our minds as mothers what should be, how much time he should spend with his children every day, and not thinking of a broader picture of how many men throughout history have ever been able to spend certain numbers of hours a day with their kids. I don't know, but I suspect there's a lot of different situations. Sometimes men were gone for months to wars. Travel wasn't so easy. They'd go, like say your husband was a cattle rancher. He had to go drive his cattle to get it sold, and it could take weeks. We are kind of have our expectations that things should be a certain way. And at least we should question, maybe it doesn't have to be exactly like that for my husband to be a good father. Maybe he's not able to. What if your husband is in the military? And it doesn't mean he can't be a good father.
Right, exactly. No, that's a good point. And I think, too, when I was growing up, Dad was such a hard worker. And
still is.
He's such a hard worker, but I'm talking about when I was really little and he was gone when I got up, and he came home right before dinner. And sometimes he came home after dinner, and I didn't see him until late. And I never, ever thought that he was not wanting to spend time with me. I never thought that. But you know why? Is because you always said, Daddy's working so hard. I think it's important for the moms out there that are going through this to choose your vocabulary carefully with your kids. Because if you say, oh, Daddy's just, if you don't have really positive language about what your husband's doing, that's also going to bleed onto your kids. Small things. So let's dive into the 5 kind of general things that you need to know about him when he is prioritizing other things or on task mode.
Okay, number 1, he has a natural instinct to provide. Part of that comes from the fact that it's the way men's brains are wired. They don't have babies. Their purpose in their role in this world, this life, is to go out there and be somebody, make something of themselves. They don't have any other real occupation that they're designed for. Mm-hmm. And we should be able to support them in that as much as we can. And number 2, when he does that, it doesn't mean that he is not putting you number 1. This is right. What's hard for a lot of women to understand, is that putting someone first doesn't mean that they don't go out and do anything. They're just by your side every second.
Right.
Can you imagine if you were married to the richest man in the world, and he didn't inherit it, he created a company, he was the richest man in the world. Those kind of men usually are very target-oriented and work very hard. Could you stand to have him work that hard if you were his wife? Our husbands may not be the richest man in the world, but they are very ambitious and hardworking and trying to do something with their life. And there's going to be a lot more chance that they'll succeed if they have you, the good woman, behind them.
Exactly. Yes, I think this whole thing goes back to the video that we did on task leader versus a relationship leader. And that would be a good one to watch to find out more about that.
His desire to protect you, to provide for you, may require that he focus on other things to do it. And that doesn't mean he doesn't like spending time with you, but that's another thing. Number 3, multitasking is not really his strong suit. Not very many men can multitask very well. So they tend to do one thing at a time and focus on that. Whereas we take for granted that we can cook, listen for the doorbell, drive a car. My mother couldn't even drive a car and talk hardly. She wasn't as good at multitasking as a lot of women. But even she could do it better than my dad.
Right. And I think this is at the heart of a lot of the frustration. And it seems like such a small thing. Well, he's not multitasking as well. But it's actually a really, really big one, because what we are expecting as women when we're complaining about this, or when we're feeling, so much sadness or frustration over this, is because we want him to do multiple things at once. And he needs to focus on whatever it is he's doing. When my husband and I, that story I shared earlier about him with school, he was basically telling me, I can't do everything. And I'm basically panicking. I'm having an anxiety attack. And he said it, he didn't choose his words in that way, but I know that's what he meant now. So just remembering that, I think, is so important. Well,
another tip that you just brought up, men aren't as good at describing their feelings as well as we are, where we'll tend to say, just say it.
Talk to me. Talk to me. Gregory, what? I'm aging here. What is it you want to say?
There may not be the words for it.
Yeah.
So understanding him without him explaining it all to you is a huge gift you can give to him. Huge gift. And then number 4, he's more motivated right now, maybe more motivated than he's ever been. It would be good to reward him for it. This guy's working late hours, not getting enough sleep, maybe not getting regular meals like he usually does. That's something you can admire in him.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think recognizing that motivation instead of looking for the negative side of it, the positive side of it, and saying, oh, well, he's working really, really long hours, instead of saying, I feel so lonely and neglected, saying, wow, he must be really getting a lot done. He must be really into this project right now, or into school, or whatever it is that he's doing. Reward, I love that. Reward him for it.
Yeah, and the obvious one that ladies are going to wonder about is, what about me? What about my needs? And that's not one of the 5 things, because that's one of the 5 things are the ways to understand him. So the 5th one is, men need to feel competent. They are really engaged when they're in the middle of a challenge, especially when they feel like, I think I can do this. I'm figuring this out and can do this. Your support of him in it really can help encourage him to, not encourage him, it makes you adorable when you do that for him. It's a gift. It's a free gift that he can see that you understand him even without saying anything to him. And you can make it easier for him. Like maybe you could tell him what you do for your husband, because he does this now. He works from home, and you. Yeah.
So my husband, he can't go to the office because of COVID. So all of the offices are closed. So he has had to adjust to this lifestyle of working from home in this kind of small office that is not very comfortable in our house, because we didn't buy a house thinking
that he was working
from home. So he has this kind of tiny little office. So on a daily basis, he is up before me, because I get up with the kids and make them breakfast, and I deliver his food to him. And he's never asked me to do that, but I deliver his breakfast by a certain time, and he's always, the look on his face when I bring it to him is just so grateful, because he's stuck in there. Sometimes he can't even get up to go to the bathroom. He's in there so intensely in these conversations and stuff. If I don't hear from him by about lunchtime or 12:30, I'll just deliver lunch to him. And I don't even ask. He doesn't ask. I don't ask. I just deliver it to him. And one day I brought it in and he said, he doesn't usually say much because he's just busy. Again, task mode. But one day I brought it into him and he said, after he was done with work, he said, "Thanks so much for bringing that lunch to me. I was so starving and there was no way I was getting out of any of those meetings. And I was so hungry." And he said, and it was so delicious. I was like, wow, I don't usually get that from him. He's usually just kind of like, oh, thanks and stuff. I don't complain. Sometimes he doesn't come out until the next meal. So I won't see him for breakfast. I won't see him for lunch. And then I won't see him until 6 for dinner. And then that's the first time I'm seeing him for the day, like really unattached, disconnected to work. At first, it was kind of hard for me because I was just feeling like, gosh, I don't see him at all. But I see him at night and when we put the kids to bed, and that's when we talk. And I just know that he's working so hard. I just know. And I hear him in there. And I think, wow, that sounds like a lot of stress. Or, wow, that sounds like, sometimes I'll even say that to him. Wow, it sounded like you had some intense phone calls today. And he appreciates it because he realizes that I realize that he's working really hard.
The solution to what about my needs, suggestions is what I did. I learned that I could handle it. I didn't think I could, but I could actually, that I could handle not having as much help with my kids.
Right.
As I would like. It wasn't easy, but it's amazing what you can do. Can you imagine those of us who are moms, can you imagine having triplets and taking care of them? Women do. I don't know how they do it. I mean, women do it, and I don't know how they do it, but we can do many things. And the chances of your husband being like this all the time for the rest of your life are not great.
Right. I think remembering too that it is temporary is huge.
It's temporary.
But even on a daily basis, this is just right now, and later we will have time together. When you do have that time together, you want it to be positive. You don't want it to be, oh, now he's coming out and now he's going to pay attention to me and now I'm going to, nag him about how much.
You don't want to punish him for being ambitious because that'll make him feel like he can't win.
You always say the motivational kind of, you should inspire him, I guess is a better way to say it. Inspiring him to want to spend more time with you doesn't include nagging him. And if the precious time that he has with you is always positive and wonderful, he's going to figure that out and he's going to want to spend more time with you. It might take time if he's used to spending time with you and you guys end up bickering over how much time you're not spending together.
Yeah, that'll just be a vicious cycle where it's
like not going to want to spend time with you because you guys always bicker when.
Well, it's like when my mother-in-law was still alive, and sometimes Bob would call her. She'd spend the first 10 minutes kind of nagging him because he didn't call more often. So it made him not want to call her more often.
He's like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, I just thought, am I going to call her and get the scolding before we can get to actually visiting? Yeah. These are things you can actually do this. You may have to get a little bit more organized here and there. Adjusting to having kids or being lonely is an adjustment, but you can do it.
Yeah, I think this is a really great subject. I think we could go on and on and on because there's just so many different mountains of scenarios that this could fall under. And, I know we only mentioned a few today, but hopefully those can translate to a lot of different ladies. And if you have any questions, definitely drop them down below. We love to hear from you. And we're here every single week, so don't forget to check back with us. I'm also attaching a link to this video where you can purchase a copy of Dixie's book and workbook, Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman. Definitely check that out. I'm also attaching all the places that you can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere we can connect with you. It'd be great to have you join us. We'll see you then.
See ya. Bye.